Hello and welcome to this session on equalization and series accounting, which elaborates how the investment accounting is done and how profit and NAV is allocated to the different investors. In this session, we are going to understand the pros and cons of each accounting and profit distribution methods, what are the best practices, calculation methods, and best practices as well. So I'm going to share a PPT and then we'll elaborate this accounting methodologies with numerical examples in Excel as well. So I'll talk through and discuss the methods using the PPT. So as we can see, it is on equalization and series accounting. To understand what is equalization, the basic and preliminary definition is it helps fund accountants and fund managers to distribute the NAV and the profit in a more fair and equitable way among all the investors. Because in equalization method, we are not creating separate line items for each investor, and we are not creating a new NAV for each of them. So it is important that whenever a new investor comes and they contribute the capital, we allocate the profit in such a way that it does not disincentivize any of the investor because of the timing gap. So that is the equalization method, whereby we try to equalize the gain and losses in a proportionate manner and be fair to all the investors. Why it is important? Because it is the fiduciary role of the fund managers and also the fund administrator to accurately distribute the profit and make it consistent and fair to all the investors. Hence, equalization method is important. And with some of the examples in the future slides and the calculation, we'll understand why it is so important and what are the methodologies to follow in equalization process. Terms often used in equalization, we have also seen that in calculation of incentive fee, high water mark. So high water mark is essentially the highest level of NAV which has been achieved and on which incentive fee has been paid in the past. So any NAV on which incentive fee has been paid, that highest NAV is the high water mark of the fund. So in this example, we can see that in the June 06, the highest NAV value has been achieved by the fund, which is 40. That will become essentially, by definition, the high water mark. Incentive fee and performance fee. This is the incentive to the investment manager for exceeding the performance benchmark set by the investor. So, for example, let's say investor expect the fund to achieve at least 5% annual growth, and if the investment manager exceeds that, investment manager will be receiving a performance fee. So if suppose that investor expect the NAV to reach from 100 to 105 and investment manager manages such a way it becomes 115, then investment manager will expect and deserves a performance fee of 15-20% on the amount by which it exceeds the performance, or it could be simply overall profit over the previous NAV. So incentive fee is something that aligns the interest of investor as well as the investment manager, and it helps investment manager to get the proper compensation when the funds perform well. What is the hurdle rate? As we discussed earlier, if the investor expects the investment manager to achieve a bare minimum profit and returns on the NAV, that minimum return is the hurdle rate. Before exceeding or reaching this hurdle rate, investment manager will not get any performance fee. Of course, they will get management fee. Management fee is the fixed 2% or 1% sometime fees which is applicable on the NAV, but that is fixed fee and it doesn't relate with the hurdle rate. Incentive fee can only be given and accrued by an investment manager when the NAV exceeds the hurdle rate. And hurdle rate is typically a minimum performance return, something we can consider this like a risk-free rate or something similar to government bond rate. That bare minimum rate that the fund has to achieve, that is the hurdle rate. So in this context, what is free ride? In the world of equalization and profit distribution, this is something that equalization method try to address. So free ride is essentially when imagine an investor buy a stock or the share in the fund at $100, and that reaches to 110. At this point, there is a $10 profit, which will attract $2 of incentive fee. So minus 2. So overall fund becomes 108. So after paying off $2 of incentive fee, the final NAV becomes 108. Remember, the GAV, the NAV before incentive fee, was 110. Now, at this high watermark, because at this number, the incentive fee is paid, there will be another investor who would like to enter. But before that, the NAV falls to 100. So when it is 100, another investor, B, enters the fund. Remember, what is the high watermark? That is set at 110. Investor B enters at 100. What happens next? Again, fund performs well, and the NAV reaches its old level, 110. So $10 profit is made. But remember one thing, that in the equalization method, because there's no line item for each investor, the fund calculate the incentive fee at the overall fund level, not at investor level. Since high watermark of the fund is 110, there will be no incentive fee calculated up to 110 again, because now went down to 100, then again went up to 110. So there will be no incentive fee, because highest level which now has achieved is 110. So here, because there is no incentive fee calculated, the later investor which came at 100 get $10 of benefit, but doesn't have to pay any incentive fee. They will pay 0 incentive fee up to 110, because that's how the incentive fee will be calculated at high water mark at the fund level. So anyone who comes at 100 or maybe 95 or maybe 90 don't have to pay any incentive fee up to 110. This is really a free ride, because in this case, even at the $10 of profit, this investor B do not pay $2 of incentive fee, which is 20% ideally they should pay, right? This is an anomaly. That is what called the free ride here. We need to address that. And there are some methodology in equalization accounting which resolves this. So let's take another example and to understand this clearly. So let's say investor A buys a share at 100. It reaches to 110. After incentive fee, the NAV is 108, because 110 is GAV, $2 is incentive fee, and 108 is NAV. Now, at the end of the quarter, the share again share price go to 120. Now, consider that at this point of time, investor B has entered the NAV and has subscribed at 108. So what happens in this case is, again, investor B will have to pay incentive fee as much as A. And let's see how. So investor A invested 100, B invested 108. Altogether, 208 is the capital. Since NAV has risen to 120, that means 120 times 2, 240 is the total GAV here. So that is what reflecting here. So 240, what is the profit? 240 minus 240 minus original investment of 208, 208, 32 is the total profit. On this, 20% incentive fee, right? So that becomes $6.4 overall incentive fee. Since there are 2 shares, right? 2 shares, A and B, each will pay only $3.2 of incentive fee. Now let's analyze this. If $3.2 is imposed on A as well as B, what happens? In this case, A is paying 3.2 on the profit of 20. Do you know why? Because this 120 GAV has reached from 100 to 120. So A made $20, right? So $20 and paying $3.2 of incentive fee, isn't it? Now, the later, which came at 108, really, is also paying 3.2, because as we discussed in the earlier example, incentive fee is calculated not at A and B level, but at the fund level, because of which 3.2 is imposed on B, whereas B has only earned how much? 120, which is the current GAV, minus its subscription amount, 108. So it came at 108 and now NAV is 120. So $12 of profit made and $3.2 is the incentive fee imposed. So what is the total incentive fee for B? B's incentive fee is 3.2 divided by 12. That is really 26.66%. So A pays 16.4% of the incentive fee, whereas B pays 26.66 of incentive fee on the profit. Again, is that fair? Not at all, because this almost 10% of a difference, or we can say almost it's becoming like a double of the incentive fee which B pays as compared to A. This is unfair. We need to fix this. And this is where the equalization method have some fixes. Again, if we need to look at what is the clawback syndrome, which equalization will try to fix, again, that is related to the free ride only. So in the clawback syndrome, we try to find out what are the issues in the equalization method that we need to be cautious of. So investor A, we have already gone through a couple of examples, so it will be easy to walk through. Starting GAV is 100, which becomes 110. Subsequently, it pays $2 and 108 is the high water mark. In quarter 8 end, 108 is the high water mark. Investor B comes and buys shares 108. Third month, the fund suffered a loss of $26. Imagine. So what happens is overall investment of 108 plus 100, which is 208. That is equation 1. And then fund level gross NAV becomes 192. So since fund has gone down by $26 as compared to the start of third quarter, so total value will be now 192, because it was initially at the start of the quarter 108. New capital came 100. Start of the quarter fund was 110. New fund that is subscribed by B is 108, and loss is $26. So 192 is the current NAV. Now, per investor NAV will become 96, because this divided by 2, that becomes 96. So that is a NAV per investor. Now, interesting point is how much loss each investor is going to accrue. Let's see. Investor A reduction in this quarter will be from 110 to minus 13, that will be 97, because investor A had a NAV at 110 at the start of the quarter, right? So if we reduce $13 from both, so 110 minus 13 will be 97 for investor A. And why we are reducing really $13? Because $26 is the overall loss in 2 shares, right? Or 2 investors. So each investor will lose $13. So let's reduce $13 from starting NAV. Starting quarterly NAV was 110 for A. Reducing $13 as loss, 97 is the share for A, share price for A. Investor B, it would be 108 because at this price, investor B had bought the shares. So 108 minus 13, again, this is losing $13 only, it becomes 95, which seems okay that investor B has a lower NAV as compared to A. But let's look at the total profit and loss, which is incurring at both level. Okay, so in this case, we see that investor A has lost really $14 because its initial NAV was 110, and if it goes to 96, as we see the share price here, its original loss is $14, isn't it? If we similarly analyze for B, that will be a different number. Let's see here. The original subscription amount was 108. Now the NAV is 96, so its loss is $12 only. Why it is like this? Why A has 14 loss and B has a $12 loss? Because we have not looked into $2 of IF, which A has paid. Remember here, A has paid a $2 of incentive fee. This is what is appearing here as $2 of difference. Now, in order to fix this, see, as the explanation, $2 at the end of second month would now claw back to the fund. Because if we don't have the equalization, this $2 will not get adjusted. But the equalization will now use the clawback to adjust this number. So after adjustment, the GAV of A will become 97 because it will be 108 plus 2, which is the clawback, and A will receive that, minus 13, because this is the loss to each investor, because overall loss is $26 divided by 2, $13 loss will accrue to each. So 108 is the original NAV, incentive fee which was paid by poor investor A, and then adjusting $13 of loss, that will become $97. What will happen to B? B also came at 108. Loss is $13, obviously, but then $1 will be given as like as an equalization adjustment on B, so that will become 96. Right now, the problem is that without equalization, the B gross NAV will drop to 96, and we need to make the adjustment to fix this $96. So this is the clawback whereby investor A, which has received $2, will it has paid $2 of incentive fee at the start, that is being compensated, whereas B, which has not paid any incentive fee and has made a lesser loss, that loss will be adjusted, and we will make this as 13. So this $1 will be adjusted from 96 and it will become $95. So it should have been $95 because B has not paid any incentive fee but benefited in the process. So we will reduce $1 from B, and B's overall share price will become 95. So there are clawbacks which ensures that investor A and B both get a pari passu or proportionate distribution of the loss as well as the profit. We have seen in this example that how the free ride also impacts the investors, and it depends on the timing. it's not always that when the late investors who are coming, they are wrongfully incentivized. It could also happen that some investor comes, say, when the NAV is already 90. So let's take a fair example here. If an investor A has paid incentive fee up to 110 and share price goes down to 90, B invest at 90. Again, between 90 to 110, there'll be no incentive fee. So $20 times 20%, the $4 will become the free ride. That is in case NAV has gone down. That can also happen that NAV has gone up. So if 110 is the gap, and B came at the point of 110, A has invested at 100, NAV goes to 110, but B came at 110 here. What happens is that NAV goes from 110 to, say, 120. A will pay incentive fee for 120 minus 100, because this is where A had invested. B will pay incentive fee also for 120 minus 100. Both are paying incentive fee at 20 only, whereas B has only made $10. A has made $20. Who is disincentivized? This guy, B. A is getting excess benefit because both are paying incentive fee at 20, whereas A has made more profit, B has made less profit. So equalization can also go in opposite direction for the next investor, and that is called contingent redemption. So there are two methods that we talk about when we talk about equalization. We also discussed another process called contingent redemption, and we'll talk about this in more detail with an Excel example, and then it will be clearer, but this is just to understand the basic fundamentals. Next, we need to also understand the series of shares and consolidated method. In case of series accounting that we talked about earlier, there could be multiple investors. Let's take an example like this. There could be some investor in January 2023 arriving at NAV 100. In Feb, NAV goes up, so investor comes at 110. In March, it could be investor at 105 because the NAV fluctuates. It goes up and down like this. So at each month, we launch a new series. And because we launch a new series, each series behaves like a new NAV. Hence, there is less complications of doing the adjustment for free ride, equalization, contingent redemptions. All these adjustments are not required in case there are new line items for each investor and each NAV. This is what we are stating here, that each NAV is launched for a new investor, new series is launched. However, here in this example, as we see, within a series, within a class A, there will be different series, and the first series will be typically called lead series. And what it does is, at the end of the year, December 2023, when all the series has made profit and have some incentive fee, they will pay the incentive fee, and then they all will be rolled into the lead series. So January 2023 is the lead series, in which February and March will also roll. And we'll see that with an example now. So let's say investor A buy 1000 lead series at 1000. Now goes to 110. It becomes 111. Incentive fee 20% is paid, and it becomes 1080 per NAV. investor B now buys 1000 series 2 shares at 1000 per share as well. Because remember, every time it becomes a new NAV. So subsequently, what happens? NAV of lead series is 1210. It further went up by 10%, I believe. And subsequently, investor B also gets a 10% increase in the NAV. So both becomes 10% higher. Now, C also arrives. So there is a third investor and buys series 3 1000 shares as well for 1000. Now, value of NAV goes up by 10% again. So as you can see, lead series, the first one, very first one, has become 1331. How? 1000 times 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1. That will be 1331. And then paying incentive fee for each growth, the NAV will be 1264 because we have deducted the incentive fee of 20%. Okay, so long story cut short, the series 2 is also 1168 if we deduct the incentive fee on this profit of 210 times 20%, that will become 42. So if we deduct 42 from 1210, we'll get 1168. Okay, this is how we get NAV. So third series is now 1080 after deduction of incentive fee of 20%. Now, what happens at the end of the quarter when we crystallize the incentive fee? Since all the incentive fee has been accrued and paid, now high water mark can be adjusted. And after the adjustment of high water mark, all the subsequent series, the other series are called subordinate series. Subordinate series will start to merge into the lead series. And the terms and condition is that all the series should have paid incentive fee. At least all the subordinate series should be in profit. Only then they will be merged into the lead series. If this one or this one is making loss and does not have any incentive fee crystallized or paid, it cannot lead into, or it cannot roll into the lead series. So that's the rule. So since high water mark has been achieved and incentive fee are paid, the subordinate series are being rolled into the lead series, which is the number 1 here. So what happens in terms of the exchange of the shares? Since investor B had 1000 shares and C also had 1000 shares, their total value of share will be determined, and that will be divided by the price of lead series. So typically, we take the lead series price and divide the value of NAV of subordinate series to arrive at the number of lead series that investor B will get and investor C will get. Because essentially, NAV value for C and B will remain the same, even if it is rolling into the lead series. So we take the NAV so that there is no unfairness and any miscalculation. So we take the NAV of B and C and we issue equivalent number of lead series to B and C. So B and C will be equally happy because ultimately they are getting the same value of NAV. So you see that in exchange of 1000 series 2, they're getting 923 of lead series because lead series is much more expensive and much more valuable. And similarly for investor C as well. So this is how the series accounting also takes place. In case of volatile market, what happens? Suppose that NAV goes up for lead series and incentive fee is paid. Investor B also buy 1000 series 2 at 1000 per share. And again, 10% up, NAV has gone up after investor B also buys. But when investor C buys 1000 shares of series 3 at 1000, because every time the new investor comes, it is a new NAV for that investor, the GAV or the profit declines here. So GAF goes down by 4%. In this case, what happens, since series C will not pay any incentive fee, then it cannot roll into lead series. So what happens, series 2 can still lead to new series. So series 2 will be consolidated into the lead series because series 2 is making profit, it has paid the incentive fee, and it can roll into the lead series, but series C cannot roll into the lead series. So that is the way we do the roll forward into lead series, and that is the mechanics of the series accounting as well. In case, imagine that lead series is making loss and subordinate series making profit. What happens? Suppose that subordinate series 1, subordinate series 2, both are making profit. Will they be merging into the lead series? And answer is no. Yes, what can happen is series 2 can merge into series, so subordinate series 2 can merge into another subordinate series. If both are making profit, both have paid incentive fee. And then subordinate series, this one 2, will get the equivalent number of lead series. But subordinate series will not merge into the lead series if lead series is making a loss. Of course, we need to also consult PPM, refer the private placement memorandum, talk to investment manager, the fund managers, and get their views as well in this kind of exceptional situations. However, these are the basic rule of thumbs that still works. And in any case, even if we have certain doubts or we have some misunderstanding about the series, we can refer the PPM, we can check the legal documents to be 100% sure that what we are doing is accurate. So there are some disadvantages of series method as well. Series methods, as we have seen, they are quite heavy on administration. It requires you to create so many line items. You need to keep checking the incentive fee crystallizations and need to roll it accurately. If there are any issues in calculation of the incentive fee for each of the line items, or the rate of returns, the number of shares to be calculated for the lead series, investor will get wrong statement and wrong value of their NAV, which could be a serious issue. So it is quite heavy in administration, also cumbersome to maintain. And in case the shares are also listed on the stock exchange, it will require a lot more documentation, and each shares has to be separately applied. So administration is quite heavy for series method. What do we wish for equalization and series accounting both? The incentive fee should be fairly allocated to all the investors, all the series and all the share classes, etc. All investors should have same or similar capital risk per share. Of course, there can be some investor who specify or who takes less or bigger risk based on the share class they are subscribing. But we need to be as much fair as possible. Single NAV per share, that is again for the series accounting. Published NAV accurately reflects the fund performance. So if it is for mutual fund or any such fund where the NAV is being published, then it should reflect all the accurate performance. So these are the wish list of the series accounting, where the incentive fee should be accurate, roll forward should be done accurately. Investors should bear the same risk if they are part of the same class, and these are the wish list for the series accounting. There are more items to discuss, and we will discuss about the incentive fee calculation in Excel for equalization methodology, because it can vary based on the series and equalization method as well. So we'll talk about in more details in subsequent series. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.